Standing by, and make sure we start with your name and general information, just
Just
so
give
we have
an
that.
introduction. My name is Harold Jordan. I live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I've been here for so many years.
And Jerry, be careful not to wave hands at all, because it will come into the shot.
Okay.
Just like that. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
I'll tie it down.
Okay, we're rolling.
All right. My name's Harold Jordan. I was born and raised in Lancaster. Did about 21 years in the United States Army, and it didn't mean that I stayed away. I managed to get back from time to time, and believe me, I was in a hurry getting back most of the times.
Actually, Harold, if you could just start with your name, where you were from and grew up, rather than the Army, because I'm sure that will be part of the
Okay.
later questioning.
Okay,
And so we'll try it again.
all right.
I'm going to ask you, how did your family come to Lancaster? Where were you born? And tell about your brothers and sisters where they were born. Go ahead.
Yeah. So for now, we'll just introduce yourself, where you grew up in Lancaster,
Okay.
and that information.
Okay.
Okay, standing by and action.
I'm Harold Jordan. I was born and raised in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Come from a large family. Stayed here in Lancaster until I left school and joined the United States Army.
Where did your family come from?
Most of them came from Maryland.
Most of my family came from Maryland.
Most of my family came from down around the Maryland area, but yet still in Pennsylvania.
You want to tell about where they lived down in the southern end, and then you eventually came into Lancaster.
Okay. They lived down in around the Quarryville area, Peach Bottom, and had a brother, my oldest brother, who bailed out of Lancaster and went into a service for A. Dewey Powell for about 40 years. And he lived in Coatesville. That's the only one that I know that was out of the Lancaster area.
And you want to give us a statement about where you grew up, where you lived, and where you grew up in your neighborhood.
Okay, I grew up on North Street. I not only grew up there, I stayed at 543 and a half North Street, and I guess the boundaries were Atlantic Avenue and Strawberry Street. That's about as far as I got, unless Mom and Pop said, hey, we're going down to the market. And that's about the extent of it.
Who were your neighbors? Tell us about your neighbors.
Okay, one of my neighbors were the Glover family. To the right side of our house, it's hard for me to say who they were because it changed so frequently. I really can't remember who was there.
You can tell about other people that lived in your neighborhood, in your block. Just
Okay, Fats Craig was one of my closest residents or neighbor. Jackie Richardson, Raymond Boots, Samuel Wright, and that's about it. Oh, I left out one. Plights. The Plights lived almost directly across the street from me.
who were your running buddies, your friends who you ran around with all through elementary school and then go into junior high and then into high school?
Well, I'll have to think on that. I'd say Jackie Richardson, Raymond Boots, who lived on Atlantic Avenue.
Start again. My best friends, my friends,
Okay.
guys that I ran around. Give it a full statement.
All right. My best friends and what we called in them days runnies was Ricky Boots, Jackie Richardson, Samuel Wright, and we all lived between Christian Street and Strawberry Street. That included the people on Atlantic Avenue also.
You want to talk about your brothers and sisters, how many you had, and you give their names, and who was the oldest, who was youngest.
Okay. I'm number 13 in the family. Uh, you cut that 13 in half and you got half male and half female as far as my family was concerned. So,
Give me their names and who was first and
oh,
who was...
please don't do that to me. Girl, I'm almost 90 years
right,
old.
all right.
My God.
You want me to tell you who they are?
There you go. Go ahead and do
I'm
it.
just joking with you. Robert, maybe you'll think about it later on. Okay, go with your schools, where you went to elementary school, where you went to junior high, when you switched from school to school.
Okay, I really wish you'd give me a lot of questions like that or whatever questions. I can answer that. I don't know where you want me to go. But however, all right, go ahead. Start with
Would you tell us about your schools, all the schools you attended, where you started?
Adam Reichard was my first school, which was about a half a block from where I lived on North Street. Next was George Washington, was just a few blocks away. Next to that was Edward Hand, and then after that, McCaskey.
And you want to go to your church, where you attended church, if you attended church, and talk about things that happened in church. I was on the choir, or I was excommunicated, whatever you want to say about church.
I attended church mainly because the church that I attended was a Mennonite church. I went there mainly because, to be very honest with you, the people didn't laugh at my clothing. I stayed with that Mennonite church until I went into the service.
Would that be the South Christian Street Mennonite Church?
That's affirmative.
You want to say that in a statement?
Well, actually, it started out on Rockland Street.
I don't know that, so tell me that whole story.
Boy, you're pushing me way back.
Well, you said Rockland Street. I didn't know about that. Go ahead.
A 90-year-old man, the memory's not that long. But anyway, yes, I went to church at Mennonite School, which first was on Rockland Street, and a few years later they moved down on Christian Street, just off of Locust, and I was treated quite well there. Versus when I tried to go to another church in the area, I was laughed at because of the clothing that I was wearing. But I made it through that. You got to give me questions.
You want to talk about the businesses and stores that were in the area, the stores you went into, the businesses that were along South Duke Street and wherever else those businesses were, and the stores that you went to as a kid, and as you got older, the stores that you went to, businesses?
Well, you're pushing me there because the one store or business that I was with a long time was the Atlantic Service Station on the corner of Duke and North. I worked there, and I spent all my spare time, other than school, right there working. After that, United States Army.
When you said you worked at that, who owned the gas station? And
Thomas Gibson.
Let me stop first. Tell who owned the gas station, who you worked there with, what you did at the gas station.
I wish you'd hit me before I go into those kind of
He
things.
can fix it in editing.
Okay. All right, now go ahead. What?
About the gas station, who owned it, who you worked there with, and what did you do when you worked there?
Okay. The owner of that gas station was, like I said, an Atlantic Service Station on the corner of Duke and North Street, was Tom Gibson, who wasn't a Lancastrian. However, he just lived originally up the highway, Harrisburg.
What'd you do there?
I pumped gas there. I washed automobiles. After learning how to lubricate and change oil, I did the whole bit. And I wasn't not much over the terms of a youngster. So.
I originally asked you about the businesses on Duke Street. If you just start up at Max's Cafe and come down. Just the stores and businesses that you remember on Duke Street, and then maybe on your own block on North Street.
Well, on my own block on North Street, there wasn't many stores. There was a Gavant store on Locust and Christian. At Andrew and North was, I forget the individual's name that owned it, but it was a gas station there for years. Further down Duke Street, a few grocery stores.
That's good. That's all right.
Okay. Questions?
I know that those stores, most of them were Jewish stores, and there was Sanitary Market, and there was Gavant's, and there was the dress store, and there was a dry cleaners, and there was some grocery stores, and then there was a synagogue around the corner. And do you remember any of that stuff in the neighborhood?
Vaguely, I knew where the synagogue was. I left out Vic's Barber Shop on North Street.
Well, we can go back and do them.
Okay.
If you want to go ahead and start.
Oh my God. Quit while you're with him.
Okay, we talked about the synagogue. You want to talk about the neighborhood being diverse and having the Germans and the Italians and the Jewish and the black all living together in the same neighborhood? You want to talk about that?
Sure, that'd be fine. As I mentioned before, the Jewish church on Chester Street. Actually, I lived a couple of years there myself on Chester, that block of Chester. Christian and North, there was a grocery store. I don't remember the individual's name that owned it, but very, very nice gentleman. Further down at the end of North Street and Strawberry Street was a service station. And I used to go down in there and be nosy. And actually, it came to my will a few years after I just stopped being nosy. I was working at the gas station on the corner of Duke and North Street. Tom Gibson from Harrisburg opened up a gas station there, and he decided I was a pretty good little working boy. So I started pumping gas up there, washing automobiles, lubricating, learning to lubricate first, and then lubricating vehicles.
What kind of activities were you involved in after school each day? What did you do after school? You got home, changed your clothes, and then what did you do?
Worked. Worked at several different
You
places.
have to give it in a full statement.
Okay. Okay. I worked at several different places, grocery stores, just sweeping them out, mopping floors. Before I worked with the gas station, and then I actually went into my own business, shining shoes, before I went to the gas station. I had a good time with that. Later years, it came to wit, as far as I was concerned. I'm glad I learned how to do that, because I became a paratrooper, and shiny boots was the thing. So that's about it. Till I went to the service.
And I know you went to work. Are you telling me you didn't do any playing at all? You never played anywhere?
Very seldom.
You never played baseball with the other kids in the
Oh,
neighborhood?
baseball, okay.
Tell me that story.
Okay. There was a league that we had, and I think it was American Legion or something. And I played on a little team, a young team. From most of the players were from Rockland Street, Atlantic Avenue, North Street, and that's about it. But I'm trying to think of the name of that.
Can you give me the names of the other players who you played with? Was it a
Oh
mixed
yeah,
team?
Charles.
Give it in a full statement. I played baseball with.
I played baseball with Gerald Wilson, Charles Whidbey, Raymond Boots, Bubble Christian from time to time. He was bothered with getting his hair mixed up. He was a good player, though. He was a good player. But the best player I remember was Charles Wedby. The boy could pitch. The boy could pitch. You gotta shoot.
Everybody else talked about Crispus Attucks. Did you spend time in Crispus Attucks?
Yes, I did.
Would you please talk about I spent time in Crispus Attucks and what I did?
I spent quite a bit of time when I could get away from Mom at Crispus Attucks, particularly when they moved down to Howard Avenue. I was able to make it that far by myself, and Mom wasn't afraid of some wolves or someone grabbing me. I really had, if I'm not mistaken, the director of that was a lady named Mrs. Ruby Payne. And I got in good with her. I was doing a lot of things like sweeping up, had nothing to do with playing, but it looked to me that that was needed. And she thought I was the most wonderful young man that ever breathed. But shortly after that, and I remember that well, and they were good memories, the Korean War broke out, and I guess I broke with it. I joined the service about that time.
You mentioned Miss Ruby Payne.
Yes.
Would you talk a little bit about her as a person? What she looked like and how she dressed and her mannerisms? Go ahead.
Yes, a wonderful lady, bossy, but I can understand that. But she was very nice. She really seemed to like me quite a bit. She'd give me little odd jobs, and I'd make a few nickels or something out of that. Sweeping floors, even mopping gym floors at the Crispus Attucks that they had on Howard Avenue. Other than that, I can't name a lot of the people that I played with. People like Miss Ruby Payne, who I guess kind of felt sorry for the poor old country boy. And, but she's a wonderful lady. And shortly after that, I joined the service.
Do you remember some of the activities that were at Christmas? I know basketball was big and skating. We did skating, but tell the things that you did there. I know there's arts and crafts and all that kind of stuff. Tell the stuff that you did and start with at the Crispus Attucks.
Okay. At the Crispus Attucks, we did a lot of things. Not baseball, basketball, volleyball. But I guess one of the most things I did was to work, scrub floors, clean kitchens, anything that I could make a few extra pennies on the side. And this Miss Ruby Payne would pay us little nickels and dimes and that sort of thing to do a lot of that stuff.
Okay, now in the summer months, Harold, when there's no school, and I realize you're working at the gas station, did you do anything in the summer months? Did you go camping, Boy Scouts? What did you do in the summer that you didn't do during the school year?
I during the summer, I actually did some camping with Babe Polite, Nelson Polite, being the camp master. We would go to the woods out by Williams Park, and we'd spend a couple of nights out there, particularly a weekend. And that was started as Cub Scouts and then later the regular Boy Scouts. But Babe Polite was there really working his tail off, keeping us straight, other children, some of my friends and myself. But we had a good time getting away from home. And yet we were protected. And I had an opportunity to eat a good meal or two that I wasn't doing too well at home.
Do you remember any of those boys in the Boy Scout troop? Can you name any of them?
Yes, I do.
Would you go ahead?
Bunny Gantz.
We'll start with the Boy Scout. In our Boy Scout troop was?
Oh my gosh. Give it a shot. In our Boy Scout troop that I remember was Charles Gantz, Charles Whitby, Bubble Christian, Raymond Boots, when we could get a hold of him. That's about all the best I can come up with a name.
Swimming, this comes up with everybody. Did you have an opportunity to swim other than high school? Did you go swimming anywhere in the area? Were any of the pools open to you, or where did you swim?
I
Give
never-
that in a full statement.
Okay. I never, in swimming, we, Bubble Christian, Raymond Boots, myself, called ourselves swimming right down Crick Lane Hill. And that wasn't far to walk. I guess I liked it because Mom said you couldn't go down there. And I guess the rest of the guys were pretty much the same. And I enjoyed the water. I'm not much of a swimmer, but I really enjoyed the water. And it was dirty looking when you looked at it, but still yet it was water that in the summertime it really meant something to me in my body.
Did you ever have an opportunity to go to a real swimming pool?
Negative. No, I did not.
Would you give that in a
Yes,
full statement?
I did.
Tell us why.
I did not have the opportunity to swim in regular pools or just to wade in regular pools in Lancaster. Number one, because we didn't have a pool. When I say we, swimming pools were pretty much segregated when I was growing up. And if you were a good swimmer, you'd always, well, I was thinking we would wait until the Rocky Springs occasion would go on for black people. But then you didn't get in the pool anyway. You didn't get in the pool anyway. So obviously we didn't have a place to really swim other than the creek. And my mother told me, if I catch you down to that creek, I'm going to warm your bottom. So that kept me away from swimming.
You've already answered where you worked as a teenager. You want to tell us about something about going to hand and teachers that you remember, or classes that were good to you? If you don't remember any, I'm just saying, I had a good math teacher, I had a good English teacher, I was good at this in school, or I was good at that in school.
I don't remember a lot of my teachers, but there are a few exceptions. I had a general business teacher, and she, even though she dressed like a man and like a wrestler, she was very nice to me. She recognized that my poor side. Don't know what the rich side was, but I was poor and didn't have, well, as well enough clothing as some of the other friends of mine had. But she took to me, and her name was Mrs. Paxton, and she was tough. She was tough. You didn't play with her, but she gave me a job at the end of school. She would transport me out to where she lived, which was out on Wheatland Avenue, and bring me back home. I'd cut grass, sweep, clean her car as best I could in them days. I was still a youngster, but she was our general business teacher, math teacher, wonderful lady, but she was tough. She was tough. She didn't take no stuff.
And you want to get into high school, Harold. What happened in high school? Going to McCaskey.
Yeah. When I hit McCaskey, a little tough. I didn't stay long. I did not stay long. Teachers were rough on me. I wasn't a slow learner, but neither was I was a pushing and moving learner. I don't think I had school on my mind. Not don't think. I know I didn't have school on my mind. I wanted to stop playing soldier boy, and I made it a reality. shortly after 11th grade. And that's all I remember about McCaskey. I just had good teachers, and I worked at night, still working at nighttime at that gas station.
Did you ever have we're going to go into the service, but
Okay,
did
no
you
problem.
ever have difficulties obtaining? You seem to be working all the time, but did you ever have any difficulties in getting an employment? Getting an employment.
Negative. I did not have any difficulty in attaining employment.
Obviously, the breakout of the war is something significant. Are there other significant things that happened to you as a child growing up in the 7th Ward? Assuming you're aware or you're old enough to remember the breakout of World War II also. Would you tell us about how that news hit you, how it affected the family, how it affected the neighborhood?
Well, the Second World War broke out, and I remember in 1941, it came to my mind, oh, I want to be a soldier. So I even though I was still a youngster and I played soldier a lot, I learned a lot of things that was going on in the service, listening to servicemen who came back to Lancaster and told their stories, and it sounded pretty good to me. It sounded so good to me that all I had on my mind was joining the service. And oh my, nothing any better in my mind than I'll be so glad when I get there and join the paratroopers. There's several reasons why I wanted to join the paratroopers. I knew they had to take me up in the air, and I was scared of being up. So, like a dummy, immediately after my basic training, I went to jump school. And that's when I really started having fun in the Army.
You just said about some men that came back from the war. Do you remember who are those guys? Older men that came back? Would you start that with a full
I sure
statement?
do. What got me to really start liking the Army was listening to some of the men that came back from the war and from the Army just in general. Leon Glover, Harry Glover, Nelson Polite, several, and my own brother, Clarence, was nicknamed Big Jim. I just knew my next step was, as soon as I hit the right age, that I was going into the service. So that's about it on that.
Okay, you want to then start with at age, and you told me earlier you were 17.
Right.
At age 17, I went into the Army. Tell us where you went, how you got there, the whole thing, your examination. Go ahead.
At the age of 17 is when I left Lancaster, and I really felt very strong about being a grown man, thinking that, and the Army was for me. And I went into the service. I took basic training down in Fort Dix, New Jersey, and someone told me you can get an extra $50. And I say extra because the pay that when I first went into the service that I was making, and I knew it before I went in, was $62 a month. And but I got 3 squares every day, even if it did come out of a can from time to time. But nevertheless, then I got wise talking to some older soldiers, particularly the non-commissioned officers. And back in them days, I'm talking about strictly black non-commissioned officers, because that's where you went at that time. We weren't integrated except at the depots and except in rare cases. But anyway, someone told me that you go airborne, jump out of airplanes, you get an extra $50. My God, that doubled my pay Well, of course I'm going, and that's what I did, fool. But nevertheless, I got after jump school. I went to Fort Benning for jump school, and after that, I felt pretty good about that. And boom, the next thing I know, I was in the Korean War, and that wasn't too good. that wasn't too good for a boy. And believe me, there was a many a night that I sat in my foxhole and cried and said, this shouldn't happen to a kid. And all before that, I thought I was a grown man. Yes, indeed.
You
So,
want to tell us about Korea a little bit?
Korea went fast. I knew ahead I only had a year being there. And it was cold. It was cold. The winter months were just terrible. And I know many a night I'd wake up from my pup tent during the Korean War, and I said to myself, this shouldn't happen to a kid. And like I said before, I really thought I was a man, but I became a kid real quick. I said, I want out of here. I want out of here. But I stayed with it, came back, and next thing I know, I was sent down to Fort Benning, and airplane went up in the air. Looks good. Next thing I know, they took me to another spot, and I saw someone jumping out there. Oh, I can do that. And there's where I went, to jump school. And it paid a little extra money, $50 extra. So I almost doubled my pay. Just jumping out of the airplane, and you only needed to jump out of an airplane once every 3 months to keep that jump pay going. And I enjoyed it. I did it. And then the next thing I know, I was getting ready to be dropped in the Korean War. And I ran into a young man who married a lady, a young girl, here in Lancaster, Mary Marsh. I ran into a young man who was with the 7th Infantry, and he was a Southern man, very nice guy. But the guy had so many stripes on his arm it wasn't even funny. Which, if I remember, no, I do remember correctly. Before I knew it, the guy had lieutenant bars on, and his name was Jim Freeman, and he was a sharp soldier. And he told me, he says, Jordan, you know, my name's Jordan, but it was Jordan to him. And I couldn't tell him anything different. He says, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. No. I said, yes, I am. Well, I'm Lieutenant Freeman. Oh, excuse me, sir. I have a friend that's from Lancaster, Pennsylvania also, and her name was Mary Marsh. And he and I got pretty tight, and he pulled me out of a company and got me down into his company, which was the 2nd Airborne Ranger Company, and said they was going to throw me out of an airplane. You'll have to get me up. But it came to fruition that he did get me up there, and the next thing I know, and I was sent back to the United States, and I went to jump school down in Fort Benning, Georgia, and loved it. Loved it. If I couldn't jump, I was hurt. And that's the one thing that stuck with me. And before I knew it, in my service career, I was a master jumper. And I did the Korean War. That was before I became a master jumper. I did the Korean War, and so did Lieutenant Freeman. We both got back to Fort Benning, and I think from Benning they sent me to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And boy, that wasn't the best for me, but I wouldn't know the difference anyhow back then. But it wasn't the best for me, but I made it through there. And lo and behold, I ran into, once again, Jim Freeman. And we just had ourselves a good time. And he asked me, are you going home anyways? Or anytime soon? I said, yes, sir, I am. He was a lieutenant then. I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, you mind stopping by and picking up my wife? He knew I had a car, see. And I said, no, sir, I'll do that. And I took her down to our next station because that's why he couldn't go. We were going down to Fort Benning, Georgia. And I took her down to where we were stationed in Fort Benning. And she was very nice. I couldn't watch the kids grow, and I think Jim Freeman, Lieutenant Freeman, and I parted company there. And but no, we didn't part company. I left out the Korean War. He got me in the 2nd Airborne Ranger Company, and he was supposed to be taking care of me. I didn't know. I didn't know. The 2nd Airborne Ranger Company was, in them days, I'm going to say, was even all black. They were, I can't say they were segregated because they were in a partially white and black division. And they attached the 2nd Airborne Ranger Company to the 7th Infantry Division. So things went well, but the 2nd Airborne Ranger Company was all black. And thank God that Lieutenant Freeman was there to take care of me. But he moved me up the line, and the next thing I know that I was coming back to the United States.
How many jumps did you do total?
Total, I think it's still, not still, I know it's just a little over 250. Yeah. Now that's static line jumping. Yeah. I did some free falling also. Free falling to me is a dream. I loved it. Mom thought I was crazy. My sister Helen knew I was crazy. And I'm the only one that didn't know anything about I had a fallacy there up above. But nonetheless, my rationale for doing that, they fooled me, see? They said, if you go airborne, you're going to get an extra $50 a month. And you don't even have to jump. As long as you got your wings, you can go on without jumping. Well, I ate that lie up. I went to jump school, got my wings, jump wings and everything like that, and the man said, come on, we're going out for practice jump. Oh, great. Next morning, come on, we're going out for another practice jump. Something's wrong with this picture. And every time I get up in a plane, particularly when I got to that door, I was scared to death. I'm telling you, I was scared to death. But on the other hand, when I thought about it, I was too scared to stop. So I just kept on going. And after I had about 10 or 15 drops, I said I was all right.
Carl, would you tell the story about running into Webby and another soldier? You want to tell that whole story?
I sure do. Fort Campbell, Kentucky, I had a few stripes in. I had 5 stripes. And I ran into 2 of my Lancaster runnies, Charlie Whidbey and Gerald Wilson. And these guys had just come out of basic training, just the 8-week basic training part of it. And I was walking across the lawn, the football field, between the stockade and Fort Campbell. I was a yard sergeant at the stockade at that time, and where the PXs were. Now, when I say across football field. It must have been 3 or 4 football fields because it's about 3 miles. Anyway, I walked and they were on the grass, and I said, "Hey, you soldiers over there," they were doing something, and I wanted to get their attention. And they said, "What? What do you mean what?" And they turned around. Here it was Gerald and Charlie Whitby. And then I said, "Oh my God, you got to straighten up right quick. What do you mean calling me? Don't you know who I am and what I am?" No, 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 don't, no, 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 wait a minute. You stationed here. What the H do you think I'm doing here? Oh, I reamed him up and down, and after that I just laughed at him. I said, "Well, I'm going to give you a break." I said, "When did you get in?" He said, "Last night."
James, you want to take a break now?
I'm fine, you guys.
Are you okay, Harold?
I'm fine.
Okay. We got to go back to Lancaster because there's some other
Okay.
questions here I got to ask you.
All right.
Tell me some of the. You talked about Nelson Polite. You talked about Mr. Glover and Mrs. Payne, and there were some men there at the Crispus Attucks too, right? Wasn't there a Mr. Tolliver or Mr. Tarver? Or that's not your time. Okay.
Okay.
Who were the men that ran the Crispus Attucks, the recreation program? Do you remember that? Because I don't know. I'm really,
Okay, the one gentleman.
give that in a whole statement. I'm looking for role models, but start with the Crispus Attucks. Go ahead.
Okay. The one gentleman I can think of, he was kind of Miss Ruby Payne's, I don't know what to call it, assistant. And his name was Brewster. I don't know what his last name was, I really don't. But he was, he had a bad one leg, but he seemed to be second in command after Miss Ruby Payne. I can't think of his name, but he seemed to be very helpful. She couldn't have run that club on her own anyway. But Brewster was very nice, and I can't remember his last name. There were a few other men that came up from the Elks who did a lot of assisting in getting most of us youngsters straightened out as far as what we're doing up in Crispus Attucks, and had a basketball team. We formed Leon Glover formed and Babe Polite formed a baseball team, but that wasn't necessarily out of Crispus Attucks. They just happened to be they come up there often.
You mentioned the Elks. Would you talk a little bit about? Were you in the junior herd?
I
Were
w-
you in the drum and bugle corps? Would you
I
just talk
was-
about the Elks in general?
Well, I was very short in drum and bugle corps at the Elks, and that was my only connection with the Elks then, because I and Tommy Allen, Mr. Allen, who played guitar, Vic Hardcastle, we thought we were pretty big time musicians. we formed up a little group, and we used to play gigs down in the country, down and around Maryland, Baltimore, York, all over. And I had a good time doing that. Well, I was making a buck too. I was making a buck. It was real nice. But on the weekends, we were generally playing somewhere. Maryland, York, Harrisburg, and even in Lancaster when they had a couple of dances or more. Yeah.
You don't have to tell me what your talent was. Were you a
Oh,
singer or
no,
were
oh my
you playing
God,
an
no.
instrument? Tell
I'm-
that whole story.
Sure. I was a drummer. And how did I get drums? I wonder myself. No, I remember well. My neighbor, Mrs. Glover, worked for the Troops, who lived out on Wheatland Avenue. The Troops had a music store. eventually, I went out there with Mrs. Glover, and I used to cut the grass for Mrs. Troop. Before I knew it, I was sitting on a nice set of drums from Mrs. Troop's. And it all came about by work. And I drive out that way, Wheatland Avenue and School Lane Hill. And I pass by that corner all the time, and I can think of me out there cutting grass after school. If I wasn't cutting Mrs. Paxton's grass, but they treated me real well.
You want to say something about who Mrs. Troop's son was?
Yes.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure.
Start
sure,
with
that's
Mrs.
fine.
Troop had a
Mi-
son.
Mrs. Troop had a son, Bobby Troop, who wrote music, went into the Marine Corps, and still wrote more music. I'm trying to think of the name of the songs. Oh Daddy, I Want a Diamond Ring, a bracelet and everything. He wrote that. He wrote
Route 66, right?
what's
Route 66.
Route 66, yes.
You're going to have to say that in the whole statement.
Okay.
So just start it over.
Okay. Okay. Where was it? Okay. Yeah, Mr. Troop had a son, Bobby, and after he came out of the Marine Corps, he wrote, or maybe it was before he went in, but he wrote Route 66 for Nat King Cole. Nat King Cole sang it. He wrote, I think before that, the Old Daddy, I Want a Diamond Ring, bracelet and everything. And I stayed working after school. It was really doable. I cut Mrs. Troop's grass, cleaned up. Then I'd go over to my general business teacher and home teacher and cut more grass, Mrs. Paxton's area, which was coming back from Mrs. Troop's house. So, yeah, they're two teachers that I'll always remember.
I asked you earlier, and I realize it's difficult. Any other role models besides Nelson Polite, Mr. Glover, in the community that helped you, that gave you some influential guidance in your life? Anybody that you can think of?
I have to include my brother.
Well, say that in a
okay.
full statement.
Okay. I may have left out my brother, Clarence. Big Jim was his name.
Well, you kind of leaned out of the picture there.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I have to go back. And
Just start with one of the other role models in my life was Big Jim.
Oh, okay.
Go with one of the other role models in my life was my brother Big
yes.
Jim. Go ahead.
Yeah. I failed to mention, but one of the other role models in my life definitely was my brother Clarence, better known as Big Jim Jordan. Basketball, football, baseball definitely, and the military. And I guess I went behind him in each one of these sports, and to include the military myself. Big Jim stayed in the Army for over 20 years also. So I must say he was an inspiration for me as far as going into service.
Could you talk about the 7th Ward structurally, the houses, the neighborhood? Was it a safe neighborhood? The housing stock was good, or the housing stock was, sorry, George.
It's okay.
The housing stock.
Well, you're talking. It's fine.
The housing stock was good or bad, or just talk about the community. You know, you go down Duke Street and here was this and there was that.
Yeah, well, Duke Street, when I was growing up, if you lived on Duke Street, you was living high on the hog. I lived on North Street, and that was a nice area. But I remember we didn't have electricity when I lived on North Street, and I learned a few things about wiring in school, particularly after I'd gotten out of the 4th grade, and I figured out a way to hook up to Leon Glover's family's electricity. And Mom didn't understand while I was on the third floor doing my homework. She didn't realize that I was doing it without that coal oil lamp. I had electricity in that third floor room, and I stole it from the Glovers right next door to me. That's one thing I learned, I guess, when I was in the 4th grade, how to do just basic wiring, hooking one wire to another, you know, that sort of thing. And I was good at that. And I remembered all the safety things and everything. I have to laugh at that for the rest of my life. I'm serious.
That's a great story. I asked you about businesses and you couldn't remember any of them, but would you describe the 7th Ward as a good area of Lancaster, or bad? The other areas of Lancaster, I know your mother restricted you from going a lot of places, but the other areas of Lancaster, how did you describe the 7th Ward? As being good, bad, indifferent? It was just equal? I didn't think I lived in a bad neighborhood. I thought I lived in a good neighborhood. Whatever you want to say.
Okay, well, the way I have to look at it is, when I was living in the 7th Ward, I was hungry a few days, yeah, from time to time. But as far as the people in the ward itself, where else was I going? I couldn't stay out there in Wheatland Avenue where I was cutting grass. You understand what I'm saying? So I had to come back in the North Street, the 7th Ward. So I don't have no qualms about any of that. I really do. I think the people I know the people in the 7th Ward knew that I may not like you, but I got to stick by it because there may be something I want from you. And in the meantime, that can be vice versa. And I really feel that's how we survived. Sure, people laughed at me, my haircut. I had what they call the bowl cut. And that's what started me in bald heading myself, man. I used to say, I'll tell you what, I'm going to get that bowl cut off my head. And some people would say sometimes, woo, look like rats done, took your hair out your head, So finally, I thought about Vic's Barbershop, and I used to go up there and sweep in front of his shop. And pretty soon he says, hey, Jordan, not Jordan, Jordan, you want to come in here? Got a couple places in there where you can sweep up the hair and stuff like that. And I started that kind of stuff, and I was making a buck or two. And the next thing I know, a guy from Harrisburg came down and says, I'm opening up that Atlantic service station over there. You want to help me throw out these pamphlets, notifying people that's what we're doing. And his name was Tom Gibson. And I said, oh, sure. And I took them things, and I must have hoofed all over the 7th Ward, putting out pamphlets about this gas station. When I got done, he told me I did a good job. And he says, what do you do after school? And I said, not much. And he says, you want to come up and work with me? Just what you sweep up, and all like that. I said, oh, yeah, I'd be glad to. So big in the devil, before I knew it, I was greasing cars, changing oil. And a little bit after that, I was even driving the cars from Duke Street on to the ramp. Then I got pretty good. People were patting me on the back for being a gentleman up at that gas station. Everyone's saying I've never seen a young man that young work so hard, and I really stuck with it. But I had to, because the bigger I got, the hungrier I was. So it wasn't a gift to anybody. It's just one of them things for getting it together. And then the Korean War broke out.
Harold, do you remember the doctors and dentists that were there in the 7th Ward when you were growing up?
Dr. Travis, yes.
You have to give that in the whole
Okay.
statement.
Okay. I remember the doctors and I think a dentist. I remember. Yeah, I had to have a tooth pulled. Yeah, Dr. Travis on Duke Street. Or what other street would they be on? And nevertheless, Dr. Travis on Duke Street, and there was another doctor, not a dentist. Travis was a dentist, wasn't it? Yeah. There was another doctor. I can't think of it.
Do you remember Dr. Starrett? Starrett?
Yes.
When you talked about Dr.
I
Starrett?
can't.
You never. You
No.
don't remember. You don't remember anything
Never,
about it?
right.
It's okay.
I knew how he looked.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Hospitals. Were you born at home? Nobody's talked about that yet. Were you and all your siblings born at home, or were you born in a hospital?
I was born on Chester Street in a house just off of Duke Street. I think there was a sanitary market was up there at that time. Yeah. That's no. I'm sorry. Correct that. I was born on Atlantic Avenue before I moved to Chester Street, where it was talking about. Yeah.
Young people will be listening to this, so would you explain that when you say I was born? People don't know about people being born at home. Would you
Yeah.
talk about that?
Yeah, well, I can only tell you where I was born, because back in them days, I wasn't no bigger than that. But nevertheless, yeah, I was born in a house on Atlantic Avenue is where 462, I believe, Atlantic Avenue.
How about nightclubs and dance clubs when you got? I realize you went to the service, but you had to come back here and cut the rug a little bit someplace. Where'd you go to? Where were the nightclubs and dance clubs and bars that were available to you?
I cut the rug before I went into the service. I had a little band that Vic Hardcastle, Tommy Allen. Vic Hardcastle played upright bass. Tommy Allen played guitar. Teddy Rich came later. Excellent saxophone man. And I was doing fine drumming until James Lucas came along. And that cat was so good on drums that I just shriveled away from drums for a period of time. Yeah.
Let's move into the area. You come back home. Just that's why I wanted to start. I come back home for the service. I'm looking for a job. And where did you start working?
When I came back from the service,
Yes, please start with that. I came
Okay.
back from the service
Okay.
and say the year. Was it 1970, 72, 71?
it was early 70s.
I came back from the service in the early 70s, and
Okay.
what happened to you?
All right, I came back from military duty in the early 70s, and I didn't have much of a problem getting any work. I'm trying to think, where did I first go to work? It's not connecting.
I know you worked at the sheriff's department. I know you worked at Manos. I know you were working
Okay,
for the city
gotcha.
police and the park officers. But I don't know what's first. So you want to? Does that bring it back to you?
Yes, it does.
Okay, go ahead. Start again, Harold.
Okay.
Say I came back from the service and got job at.
I came back from the service, and I started working. Oh God! Wait a minute now. I'm confused now.
All right, let me help you again. Which
I
one?
don't-
You tell me which one you worked at first. Did you go to the sheriff's department first, or were you at Manos? Did you go to work at Manos
Sheriff's Department was before
first?
Manos. Yeah.
Okay. You want to start with that?
Okay. I retired from the service and came back home, and I worked part-time with Lancaster County Sheriff's Department. Shortly after I got started with them, there's some people that gathered and said, you can do more than that for us. We need somebody to do something about this drug problem we have down the southeast section. And I think you'd be a good man for that. I don't do no drugs, so I don't know nothing about no drugs, you know. Well, that's not what we're after. We're after someone that's going to be able to run some of these young boys, push them into doing the right thing rather than being out here smoking pot, shooting heroin, and all that kind of thing. And he says, we've got a discipline problem with children. And these people were from the General Hospital who was talking to me about it. I said, well, what is it that you're looking for? Well, we need somebody to get the youth together and tell them that this is just not healthy. And so then a guy by the name of Ed Carvalho was in that same group. And I honestly believe they were speaking of, I honestly believe they were initially speaking of, I need you to help us with these black kids in the 7th Ward. And I was living in the 7th Ward also, and I think that's where they were at. And before we could get started in whatever it was they was asking for, I don't believe that they really knew what they wanted. I knew they wanted kids off of drugs, but they didn't understand it can't happen at the snap of the fingers. So they really wanted more than that and didn't realize it, I'm sure. But anyway, with the help of the General Hospital, people from the General Hospital, and some of the people living right within the southeast area, they talked about a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center. And someone said, well, that guy just retired from the service, and he'd be a good man for that sort of thing. We know he's seen a lot, you know, and that kind of stuff. And, you know, when Dr. Zavanos talked to me about it, and I said, where did you get the idea that I can do anything about it? He said, well, then that's when they told me, he said, you got to understand something. You don't need anything about learning how to smoke marijuana, how to shoot heroin. You don't need to know anything about that. Our problem starts with these young kids who just think that instead of reading books in school, listening to teachers in school, is going to take them through life. And you know, they gave me all of this, and I said, well, what do I have to do with that? I said, I'm the last person that thinks about life except for his own life. You know, nowadays, I had 20-some years fighting almost. So they said, no, we just know, we have a feeling that you can put it together. And what they were talking about was getting the children together. When I say children, I'm talking about little teenage boys. And but they thought they was half-grown men. And they showed me some places, and then I took off and went to some places to myself, you know, Philadelphia, Ohio. I went pretty close. Charlotte, North Carolina, and I looked at different things that were going on in rehabilitation centers. But I noticed most of them that I went to were grown people. And I went to the jails and all that, all that sort of thing, you know. But I'll tell you what, If I had to do it over again, I would not even touch it. I'll be very honest with you. I would not touch it again. On the other hand, I'm glad I did. Because when I got started and I really thought that I knew what I was doing, I felt pretty good about what I was doing. And I could see from the kids that I brought into the program, and I didn't even know what kind of program we wanted until I must have visited 12 different programs throughout the United States, to include all the way out to Nevada. And and the whole thing told me that the problem here is a big lack of discipline. And I said to myself, now, who else could be just better than you as far as discipline is concerned with what you've just gone through after your years of service? And I got strong. I got strong thinking about that, and I said, you're right. And this guy, Ed Carvello, another guy that was from the hospital, I can't think of his name, they got me moving, and I said, well, I need to go to some places to see what we're talking about. And I did. I went all the way out to Chicago, different centers, and that sort of thing. And that's where I got my ideas, even down to Philadelphia. Philadelphia was the best for me. Philadelphia was the best for me. I learned a lot down there in a 2-week time. And yes, sir.
Would you say something about, you haven't mentioned Manos, would you say it by name and where the first center was?
I'm coming to it.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. And that's how I got started with Manos. Manos. Where we first thought was the best place, and it was down on South Queen Street, an old funeral home, and that's where we got started with Manos. I like to call it Manos rather than Manos House, because it was more than a house. It wasn't the house, it was the people that we were treating that kind of put that whole thing together. I could not have done it myself, but it was a matter of, and I understand why a lot of the people from the General Hospital hit on me. Because the whole problem was with particularly the youngsters that we were dealing with was lack of discipline. I say it was the youngster, but I'm saying anybody that has to use those drugs to feel good about themselves. So it's not just the youngsters, it's the oldsters too. They need a change in life. And I went to Chicago, somewhere way out west, and learned from facilities that had already gotten started. And everyone was saying discipline, 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 discipline. We're lacking in that, and there's a need for that with the juveniles. Then I came back here, and having been already in the courthouse, I was listening to some of those attorneys, and I had private sessions with some of those attorneys. We talked and we talked and we talked about the drug and alcohol problem with kids. And I must have did a year of traveling from one place to another, seeing what they're made of, what are they doing, how successful have they been in doing it, and all like that. And that's how I virtually put Manos together when I got started. And it worked out well, I think. I think it worked out well.
Would you tell us how many years you were there? How many years you were there, and when you decided to retire?
Okay. I got to think on that. I must have been there about 10 years. Huh?
We'll have the scrap. I think you were there a lot longer than 10 years. But
At Mono? No, not
Yeah.
at Mono.
oh yeah, Harold.
You think so?
Yeah, because you started that in the in the 70s and
Yes,
you
in the
didn't finish
70s.
up to like 90.
You got a
Yeah.
point, boy. Time goes fast, man.
That's about 30 years.
Time goes.
Anyway, we won't. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, do you know how? Yeah, you're not going to know that. Okay, we're almost done here.
Okay.
There's a question on here about what did you like least about living in the 7th Ward? Let's stop. Let's go back to your occupation. You eventually became a private detective.
Mm-hmm.
You worked for the city police. You started their park officer program. Start about with the park officer program, the problems they were having in the parks, and how you took that over.
Well, I didn't really take it over.
You got to start from the beginning.
Okay.
I became a city park officer,
Okay.
sergeant.
I
They put the stripes on you.
I became a Lancaster City park security person for the Lancaster City Police, and I got started with that just as a sideliner because I'd already started the Drug and Alcohol Center, and I explained to everybody that was pushing me to do the other thing. I said it's just a matter of doing it at what time because I still had to run Monos. Well, it was all night when they hired me at the city police department, but that was fine. All they needed was I don't know what you want to call it, an individual that, well, you don't have to know people, but you have to know when to be angry with people, and you have to know when to be nice. And that I must have had pretty good sense of ability to do those things. I didn't stay that long with them, Gerald. I didn't.
You want to talk about your private investigator?
Oh,
or how long?
that was on the side. You keep that quiet. That was on the
I
side.
think you're still doing a little bit of that. Okay. All right. Well, all right. There's a question on here, Harold, that says, "What did you like least about living in the 7th Ward?" And I'm going to give it to you straight. Did you feel the prejudice? Did you feel being put down because you live in the 7th Ward, or did that not bother you, or did you not see that aspect?
I didn't see that aspect. You know.
You have to start again.
Okay.
About living, the part I saw, I liked the least about living in the 7th Ward. I don't like the question, but
Yeah, the part that,
how about this?
yeah.
Just tell us why you enjoyed living in the 7th Ward. How about that?
Well, I enjoyed living in the 7th Ward. I was born in the 7th Ward, and I was raised up there. I went to school there, and didn't have a lot of problems. Kids laughed at my form of dress. When I could dress, put on a nice pair of knickers or something. But my shoes was in bad shape. Yeah, I never had the right haircut, so I went bald-headed. Yeah, that sort of thing. But other than that, I don't have no qualms with having grown up in the Southeast in 7th Ward. Where in the hell else am I going to go? And Gerald, after I got sensible, which was when I was about 12 years old, that's when I really started working out in the West End for cutting people's grass, the troops, the people that owned the Dodge company and all like that. They would transport me back and forth. So my mind might have been a little different than the average kid my age, and I had an early jump with that. I don't know. I don't have any qualms about having lived on North Street. The only qualms I have about it, and that's not North Street area's problem. I hated to clean those globes that you light, your lamp up with. You know what I mean? That was my job. Man, I used to tell people, save that paper. I need that. And that's the paper that the Sunday News or something. I'd wrinkle that stuff up. I could clean one of them bulb globes. I could clean that thing with that boy. Never use a speck of water. I was good with that, yeah. But, Gerald, other than that, I didn't have electricity before I went in the Army. You understand what I'm saying? Of my own, you know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, it was candles and a little bit of kerosene or whatever we used in them lamps. Yeah. If I listened to a radio, I was always glad when the spring and the summer come because people had the doors open on North Street and I'd sit on the porch and play with the kids. Well, I'd listen to the radio.
What impact did the educational system have on you during this time frame, growing up in Lancaster? Did Lancaster's school system impact you? Did you do well because of the school system here?
I think so. The one thing that it did with me.
Talk about the educational system.
Yeah.
The one thing the educational system did for me. You have to restate that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The one thing the educational system did for me.
Okay, the one thing that the educational system did for me was, number one, I had a place that I couldn't hide. Yeah, had other students. Number two, the teachers in the system, the educational system I had in Lancaster, very nice. They knew a poor kid when they seen one. They wouldn't allow the other kids to laugh at me because they seen a patch or two back here on my cheeks. They may have seen my mom's haircut on me, and they may laugh at that. Look like the birds got me. That's what this bald head comes from. I've been having a bald head ever since I was 12 years old. And I can still grow hair. But yeah, that and I don't mean any harsh thing against the educational system. They couldn't have done nothing about it. The teachers didn't like if they'd heard that someone was laughing at they'd call that person off to the side and correct that person. Say, look, don't laugh at him, so and so and so and so. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff.
I know you have your Masonic ring on.
Yes.
And what other? Would you talk about I know it's a secret organization, but could you say what you can say about your Masonic? And obviously you did that in other places other than Lancaster, but talk about the Masons and any other fraternal organization or organized group that you were with. Go ahead, start with the Masons.
I
Talk about when you joined the Masons, if you're allowed. Are you allowed to say that?
I'd rather stay away from that.
Okay,
I really
just
would.
Talk about. Can you say anything about that group?
Wonderful organization.
Okay, yes.
Okay, the Masonic Lodge, and I started in Atlanta, Georgia. Wonderful organization. Naturally, normally, people take that lodge, and I don't care where it may be, south, east, west, north, doesn't matter. Many of folk that join these lodges, particularly the Masonic Lodge, feel that it's a party. And it wasn't designed for that. It wasn't designed for that at all. And I don't care how much secrecy that the lodges have, that's okay. But they need to get down to where they're doing something, not just for themselves in the lodge, but for the people who can't whatever. can't whatever. It's a strong lodge. It's an old lodge. It's a astute situation, but I don't see them doing that much anymore, if anything, other than having a meeting. And I don't know. They're supposed to be a little bit stronger, and I mean they need to strengthen their own wit and go back to the beginning days of the purpose of the lodge. It's not just a fun thing. After you do the good things that you're impeded with, they need to then understand and pass on to younger people, here's what it's about. And here's what you get once you understand all of this. Here's what you get if you get to rolling the way the lodge is supposed to operate. And I don't mean operating, hey, you're a good man, fella. Oh, you're a wonderful lady. You know, I don't mean about that. Obviously, you're not in a lodge. Not that kind of lodge. So we won't talk no more about that. But
We're going to finish up, Harold. Just
All
one
right.
more thing. All of us are a product of the 7th Ward. We all got something out of it. Would you just give a final statement about I am who I am? I received some guidance and leadership qualities that took me through life, or whatever you want to say about growing up in the 7th Ward in Lancaster that helped you go through life.
And I'm saying too also, what do you want to say to young people? How do you want them to think of you and your life, what you've done, or what advice would you give young people?
Do the first one first,
Yes.
and then do that.
okay, what's your first one?
My question is, tell us about growing up in the 7th Ward and how that helped you go to the service and go through life.
Oh, that's easy.
Would you start with growing up in the 7th Ward?
Yeah.
Because
Well-
settle back in the chair first.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Growing up in the 7th Ward.
Growing up in the 7th Ward, I remember of being hungry. I remember of not having any money as I grew older. I also remembered how I could get that money without going to jail. And what did that mean? Get a job. Don't care what kind of job it is. Gerald, I started out shining shoes. I still got my box. My box is in here somewhere. I started shining shoes up and down North Street. And oh, I like to get the ladies that wore white shoes in the summertime. Because I did a job on it. Let me have these and I'll bring them back this afternoon, you know, and that sort of thing. Man, I was making a lot of good pennies, you know. And I thought I was good at it too. And I was, and I don't mean to brag or anything like that, but it's something that said, well, Harold, this is in you. People told me, said, you know, you need to go up to Tony's, and it was Tony's barbershop uptown, and shine shoes, because you're good with that. I said, nah, I'm all right here. The money I make up at Tony's, I'd have to give to Tony. And then at the end of the week, Tony would pay me, but it wouldn't be all that money that I made. So anyway, you know, I went from shining shoes to pumping gas, and I wouldn't have gotten that pumping gas job had it not been for a guy named Tom Gibson, who was buying that station up there at that time, and what he had heard, what a hard worker I was. But I think kids get the wrong idea about making money. They want to make it fast. And they want to make it big. And that's why 625 makes good money. because that kid's coming there one day, 625 East King Street. You see what I'm saying? But I was happy with the 15-cent shoe shine because I knew it was gonna get a quarter. But still, oh, still, I went on and shined shoes up and down North Street, Duke Street, and then some women would say, "Well, you don't have to do them right now. Bring them back to me tomorrow." You know, and I had my little old bag to put the shoes that need to be shined. You know, which I do that when I came home. But I did, you know. That's what really ran me into the Army. I was getting older faster than I could count it back in the earlier days. And I'm saying, I need to eat. Don't have to be 3 squares. If you give me one good meal, I think I could make it. And I said, I'm going to join Uncle Sam. I'll get 3 squares there. My brother Clarence didn't force me. He's the one that enticed me to go on, you know. And I went on and did it, and food was good. The few pennies that I got when I first went in, it tickled me after I gave it some thought. I think I was getting something like $52 a month. I was making more money at the gas station pumping gas and lubricating cars before I went in than what I would got there. But I said, but a few days ahead, somewhere along the line, it's going to increase. And I thought about the traveling that I was going to do. And that's really what held me into the service in the beginning. It wasn't money. It was the fact that I knew I could eat 3 squares a day. So I didn't need a lot of money, but I wanted to travel. And that's why Uncle Sam and I really put our heads together and said, this is going to be real. Okay.
Put it all together.
That's good. We're done. You want to take a break and then your nephew.
And we're rolling again.
Okay, what would the circumstances be behind your wound that you suffered during the Korean War?
Scraped. It wasn't scraped. Nothing real bad that I didn't recover from.
Now, were you engaged in battle at that time?
Yes.
Combat?
Yes.
Did your unit take many casualties in that particular battle?
As well, not necessarily in that particular one, but when the Korean War broke out, or it wasn't so bad, but later on it got real bad, and I think I was pretty fortunate. I didn't have to stay there. I went to a hospital. I can't think of what the name of that was. It was in Japan. Yeah, it was in Japan. But other than that, I came back, and before you know it, I was back in the United States.
Okay. And I understand you also were in the Vietnam War.
Yes.
And how many years, let's talk about Vietnam for a minute.
Okay.
During the Vietnam War, what was your job and what specialty were you in, and did you get wounded in that particular conflict?
No, I didn't get wounded in Vietnam. My job was still the same, infantry, and I was a platoon leader most of the time. When I say most of the time, we were short officers, and I was a platoon leader.
And what unit were you in Vietnam?
Vietnam,
First Corps.
1st Infantry Division. I forget what battalion it was. It's yeah, but it was a rifle company.
Rifle Company.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me digress a minute. Now, between the Korean War and the Vietnam War, when did you go to the Dominican Republic?
Oh, that would be, I know the month well, May 19, I think it was 65.
Okay.
Yeah, 65.
Well, tell me a little bit about the conflict in the Dominican Republic.
Very very simple. You remember? I don't know if you remember or not, but they named the Korean War initially as a police action. Big difference. Dominican Republic and what they call the police action in Korea. Big difference. I would call that Dominican Republic affair a real police action, because that's what you were in army fatigues. You was doing nothing but walking up streets. You got your snipers that were sniping at you from buildings. You know, my preference was always to stay at where you're outside of the city, and then go in and clear what areas of the city you want to clear, and then get that part filled, and make sure that you're standing pat with whatever troops you're using in it, and stay there until you really have to move from there, because if you don't, you can repeat the same thing right over again. And that's basically how we really took care of the thing down in Dominican Republic.
Now, what unit were you affiliated with at that time?
503rd at 82nd at that time.
82nd Airborne 503rd?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Now, were you awarded any medals during the Vietnam, Korea, or Dominican Republic?
Yeah, a few.
Could you elaborate on that?
I really don't think it would be. I couldn't get a star for my combat infantry badge for being in Vietnam, but I did get a star from other places. Vietnam, if you like hot climate, working in it, when I say working, I'm talking about fighting in it. If you have to fight, wars are not all fighting. I don't need to tell you, Robert, you know. It's not all fighting. A lot of sitting around doing nothing. There's a lot of eating and conniving and all that kind of carrying on. But, yeah, something slipped. What was
Yeah,
your question first?
Tell me, what was your highest award that you received?
Silver Star,
Silver Star?
yes.
And what's the one after that?
Bronze Stars,
Bronze Star?
yeah.
And you were awarded Bronze Star at least twice?
Yes,
And I understand, what about your Purple Heart?
Purple Heart.
Okay. Tell me a little about how you got the Purple Heart. You have more than one.
No, I only have one. Thank God. No, I only have one.
All right. All right. Let's move to a bit life after the service.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. A little bit of life while you're in the service. How do you keep in touch with your family? Were you married at the time?
Well, when you say at the time, there was a time that I wasn't married and still in the service, yes. But most of the times, yeah, I think most of the time I wasn't married, to be honest with you, in the service.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, when you're in the Army, did you have plenty of supplies? Did you have enough food to eat for you and your troops?
Yes.
Okay. Were you under a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, and versus the combat time versus not when you're in combat? What kind of pressures did you feel, and what kind of stress as being a military soldier? The stress that was going on.
As you know, stress can be found real quick in the service, and it can be sometimes, all the time, part-time. I've been on edge one moment, and the next 5 minutes, I may be a different person because of the changes that may come along. So I don't know how to put that. I really
Okay.
can't.
Now, what did you and your soldiers do to alleviate stress, or what was the entertainment like? did you, what, in the zone,
Well,
combat zone?
we kind of entertained ourselves. We laugh at the foreign population, if any of them were close by or something. We would laugh about old stuff that happened back home. We would laugh about stuff that we thought we might be going to do when we went on R&R,
Okay.
and that sort of thing.
Now, where did you go on R&R, and what are some of the places that you visited while you're in the military?
Japan was the only place I went both times that I went on R&R. And I was operating in different places,
Okay.
but went to Japan for my R&R though, each time that I went, twice. That wasn't in
Area?
not the same war, I mean.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't the same war, yeah.
Did you keep a personal diary?
No.
No? Now, after the service, some of these questions you probably had before. Do you recall the day that your service ended when you retired? Do you recall that day? And tell me how you felt the day you retired.
No, I don't. I'll be very honest with you. I don't remember the day that I retired. I don't.
Okay. Do you remember where you were when you retired?
I think so.
Okay. Could you tell me where you were?
Fort Benning, Georgia.
Fort Benning.
Mm.
All right. What did you do? What did you do in the days and weeks right after that?
Right after that,
Right.
came home.
Came home.
Yeah.
Came home to Lancaster.
Yes, indeed.
Now, do you feel that, like we talk about soldiers that have post-traumatic stress, PTSD, do you feel as though that you had PTSD or had PTSD or showed any signs of PTSD during your time in the military?
Negative. No.
Okay. Not at all.
No. Not that I know of.
Okay.
Someone else would have to recognize that and tell me.
Now, we covered the work in the previous interview. Did you utilize your educational benefits when you came home from the Army, like the GI Bill or anything like that?
No, I did not.
Okay. Okay. Later years in closing. What did you do or go after as a career after the war? Tell me a little bit about. You talked about monos and you talked about some things like that.
After coming home, and I had all good intentions, no matter how long I stayed in the Army, I was coming home to Lancaster. And I guess one of the first things I did was trying to think. Oh, I ran work. If you're for work, yes. One of the first things I did that I thought was useful to me and to the community, I ran Barnes Hall.
Okay.
They had some problems there, and someone had told them that I believe Jordan could help you out there. And I think that wasn't my first job,
Right.
because I had already formed monos,
That's fine.
but still they came and got me to do the running of Barnes Hall and straighten that out. And the only reason I could do it was my board member said, okay, you go ahead and use him because it's still county work.
Right.
And whenever he's done there, he's coming back to monos. And that's what I did.
Now, did you ever attend any reunions from your past military time or past units?
Negative. Any of my units that have big shedings going, I'm either doing something else here or I'm going somewhere else. No. So no, I haven't
Do you
attended.
keep in touch with any friends that you were served with in the Army?
I used to. Most of my friends are dead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, who are some of the guys that you know have passed?
Dement person. lived down in Washington, D.C. That's the only one I can name that was in the service with me. Yeah.
Okay. Now, is there anything else you would like to add that we haven't covered in this interview? Anything at all?
I don't know what it would be.
Okay. All right, Mr. Jordan, I'd like to thank you and Godspeed.
We thank you for your service.
I thank you. I thank all of you.
All right.
Yes, indeed.
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you.